Hello, everyone, and welcome to FCI Live 2026. This session is Effective GM Board Relationship, building it through the transition. So, we are very excited to have the team from Assabet Co-op Market here, Leah Champanelli and Sam McCormick, board chair and GM respectively. They have actually lived the experience and come out the other side to tell the tale of transitioning from a working board to hiring a GM to building that relationship and making it effective through store opening and beyond. So, very excited to have them here today. Real quick, just want to thank our champion sponsors for FCI Live. These three co-ops really make it possible. Thank you to Frontier Co-op, Cabot Creamery Co-op, and National Co-op Grocers for being consistent supporters of the series and making sure that we can offer it for free to all cooperators across the US. Thanks, guys. All right. So we are here with Leah and Sam, who've always been extremely generous with the startup movement, and they are which Sam was just telling me. Well, let Sam tell you, but they might be some of the only people who can speak to getting through the startup experience together as board chair and GM, and how they got through it and made it effective on the other side. And if you've been watching the series, we've been talking about the issue of the board GM transition and how to make it work and the challenges folks have been having with it, along with the GM crisis, with just the lack of a number of people available to do the job. And that conversation, it really kind of culminates here. We didn't put this last on purpose, but I'm kind of excited we did because this really kind of brings it all together. So I am really grateful to both Sam and Leah for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
All right.
Oh, you want to kick it off, Leah?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. This is so exciting to see so many people that want to hear about this stuff. I'm Leah Chapinelli. I'm board chair for Assabet Co-op Market. We were chatting a few minutes before we started, and I have been board chair for almost 6 years. I'll let Sam do all the celebration of the fact that we continue to work together, and it's been pretty remarkable. And I think that speaks to, I think, why this transition was something that maybe at the time didn't feel that smooth, but as we continue to grow and evolve as a co-op, certainly the partnership that I feel with Sam is is core to how we keep moving along.
Thanks, Leah. I'm Sam McCormick. I'm the general manager at Assabet Co-op Market, and my pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And excited to be here today. I think it was complete happenstance. We were like, what's the furthest date that we could be at that we can still help present? Because we'll fit it in the calendar somewhere. So I'm glad it worked out, and I'm excited that so many folks are engaged with this topic. It seems to be like the perpetual topic that we all need to talk about and try to solve for again and again. So yeah, it has been exciting, and for us, we're coming close to our third year, ending our third year of operations. At the end of May, will be 3 full years of operations for Aspet, so that's really exciting. And so Leah and I have been working together in a couple different capacities since I was first hired. So Leah was on the hiring committee for my hire to the co-op and then transitioned to the board right before I came on officially as a staff person. And so we've officially had, whether or not she was the board chair, we've had a working relationship in that capacity since then. So yeah, it's been 6 years of pretty awesome work together. So it's exciting to present this together for the first time. So yeah.
Well rehearsed. You'll all see.
Oh yeah, we're real good with our bullet points. Our goal today, though, and in conversation with JQ was kind of around this topic, what specifically would be helpful. And so we're looking at three three categories of things: clarity of roles, um, clarity of authority, and kind of governance process, and how that happens through all this transition. Before we dive too deep, though, I wanted to get a quick sense of who's in the room because we've got 25 people in the room right now. So it would be great to get just either a show of hands or a few shout outs. I spy a few operational folks, so I know I see a few. I see Tyler and I see Ray, um, and a few others. But if there is like a quick like show of hands for who's in a governance role on the call today? We've got, and you can even use your raise hand feature or something. Yeah. Um, and then so we've got a whole handful. And then who, if we want to take the hands down, and then who's here in a operations role? You see, I know we've got a few. And do we have just our miscellaneous consulting support folks? I think I spot a few as well in here. See, Alaya. Alana's here, and I see another FCI staff person. I think I see Mercedes there. Yeah. Um, so yeah, we've got a nice mix of folks in the room. So as we're talking, I think Lee and I both are on the same page that we'd love to be. If there's like a specific topic as we're going that would be preferable to kind of go in on more, we're happy to do that. We'll kind of do this overview of these three anchor points, and then we're happy to take a deeper dive into any one of them if that's where you all are at. And we want to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A and conversation. So, with that, um, we're going to kind of shift into our first anchor point. Um, and as we're doing that, I want you all to think about like what in your situation, just for like for later on. So this is just trying to give people a little time so you don't have to do like an instant response. So for when we're getting into that Q&A portion, what of the board GM transition process is the hardest for you right now? And if you want to think about that, and then maybe we can talk about that more towards the end. So where are the pain points for you? And then we'll bring that back in later. Um, so we're on to our first anchor point, which is clarifying roles early and then revisiting them often. Um, Leah, do you want to kick it off with talking about a little bit of the history before I came on? I know some of it for
Sure.
you uh is deeping into is like deep in the archives, but
Right, right. No,
yeah.
absolutely. Just to back up a little bit, so I was on the hiring committee. I joined the co-op in 2016, somewhere around there, and I thought that, wow, we'll have a co-op next summer. So I was pretty naive in thinking about the trajectory that it takes to get a store open and then, manage that store and stay um, sustainable. So there I was, and I was a member, and I am an HR people and culture background, and I was asked to be on the hiring committee. And so it was during that time that we were aggressively, the working board that existed while I was over here on this hiring committee was aggressively looking and doing a site search. And so much of what that working board was doing was around where the heck is this co-op going to be? And that was a very long process. And we found a place, and that didn't work out, and so we were sort of back to square one. So what I understood is I was on this hiring committee, and then I was later asked if I was interested in board service. Was that working board, as many of you know, did everything. From thinking about what the store is going to look like, to what's going to be on the shelves, to what the logo is going to be. Well, that's actually a good one. The logo was a good a good example, excuse me, of clarifying roles. Excuse me. And so when I finally came onto the board and Sam was with us as a GM, we began to look at those roles and responsibilities and what did that transition look like. And there was definitely a rift between sort of the sentiment of and the culture of a working board, and then talking about this movement into a governance board. And there's actually nobody that remains on the board from that time. So there wasn't friction in that regard, but it was just such a different culture. And so people were like, well, wait a minute, I want cornflakes. No, wait a minute, I only want organic, but wait, I don't like the color of the logo. And then all of a sudden we had to start thinking about operational accountability and governance stuff. And so that was sort of the big eye-opening part. And a lot of people, there was some grief involved, I think, not just from the people who'd been on the board, but grieving members of the co-op community. Like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be doing this. Let's go build a co-op, right? And having to not only communicate that to the current board members, to anybody who might want to join the board, but also communicating that out to the co-op community at large. And so that was probably the biggest sort of, I'll keep going back to the word culture shock, is like, actually, no, we don't have that authority, and we're going to parse that out. We're going to figure that out. And what felt like many, many, many meetings of defining roles and responsibilities. So that's sort of the foundation of it, is that shift of where people feel very energized and very much involved in that they can make an impact. And then saying, oh, but wait, that's operational. Wait, I can't do that. Why can't I do that? That's why I want to join the board. I want to tell you what's going to be on the shelves. I want to tell you what color sweatshirts we get. So that's sort of the background to it. Should I say more? Is that good to get started, Sam?
I think that's a great start. And so Leah brought up one example, which is a perfect one of and this is I think works for everybody because we've all heard advice and been like, that's for someone else though, right? That's totally for someone else. And so the board was told, don't change your logo before you hire a GM. Inevitably, there will be a branding moment to get the store open. I think JQ might have been one of those people who was like, don't change your logo. And there were some folks. So Leah is was not part of that group. She was not on the board at that point. So she can safely say she did not do this. But there were some folks that were like, no, we need to take it from a worded logo to something else. We need to have more of a logo. And then one of the first things it was like when we've all had these experiences in different ways, but like I came on and there was a very short list of not truly emergent things, but urgent things that there was a short list that people wanted me to take care of when I was first hired.
Mhm.
And like top of the list was conflict over this logo because it had been changed. Not everyone was happy about it. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, no, we can't do that. And if anybody remembers, if somebody was on a peer call, like some folks from Prairie might remember this, but the old Assabet logo was a word logo. So it said Assabet Market and it was in green letters. And then it had an outline of an apple with a leaf sticking out of it. And we're being recorded, so I will be not too graphic, but it looked like butt cheeks over the word Assabet. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, I totally understand where a very inspired board is not thinking that that's what they look like. But in reality, that's my job. That's my operational job is to say, like, think like a fourth grader. What does this look like? How are people going to receive this? Right. And so I just took it off. That was the first official act I think I had as a GM was I took the apple back off of the logo and was like, we're gonna do an actual branding project in the next couple of years. We're just gonna leave it as a word logo until then. So it's like kind of like a funny story, but if you think about that and the hands-on level that the board had prior to me coming on, it was taking that by 1,000 of like how many things we had to say, no, this is now the GMs, this is now. And there was a work process that the board was going through as I was hired that was a roles and responsibilities document. And that was something that we had gotten from JQ and FCI. And the board had done kind of a first round of saying, well, this is where we think the board's authority and the GM's authority live. And then when I was hired on, I reviewed it, and then we had meetings together where we said, now, do we have the same opinion? Are there differences of opinion? I think there were a few folks that were worried that I was going to be like, it's all mine, and just like take it all. And in fact, I was like, no, you all can't give me final say on the budget. You must retain that, right? And it wasn't any major stuff, but it was still good. It was like really good for us to have those conversations. And I think, like Leah talked about, that bit of like a rift that can happen. It was softened by using some of the tools like that. Um, and then as we did it, we came to the secondary realization that it was talking about role and responsibility about decision making. And what we ended up getting into the weeds around was the doing of. right? Because we still had a working board and I'm still one person and I had a half-time marketing person. So it was like, wait, if you have the final decision, but you're not doing all, and so it then produced a secondary set of work where we said, well, then we'll also define within those who's doing the work itself, not just like making the decision on it. And it created, I think, a fairly useful structure for us moving forward where we said, like, which hat am I wearing right now?
Mhm.
And we got to the point where our board is actually pretty functional at this. We're saying, like, in this moment, I am volunteering for something at the store. Like, I want to help count inventory. That means I am, in this moment, not a board member. I am a volunteer working for Sam and the staff, right? And kind of getting to that point where we could separate those kind of voluntary duties that were happening. Um, and and it was using tools like that. And then I think the key in all of it was that we didn't like let it go. We used that tool multiple times
Mhm.
over the years as we got to opening, and we had to go back to it. And we had to rework it again to say, like, is this still correct? Is this still what we're using? Is this still accurate? Um, so that was kind of one of the pivotal tools I think for us in that first stage.
Hey
And
Sam,
we
can I
had,
just add
yeah,
something there real quick?
yeah, absolutely.
It's still something that, so we're in board recruitment season right now with our annual meeting coming up. And it is still something that I lead with in terms of introducing sort of the concept of a governance board to people who are interested in being on the board. And in the slide deck that I have used, there is literally a slide with three hats on it. And so it's about your board hat, your co-op member shopper hat, and potentially your volunteer hat. And so we kind of talk about like being very cognizant of like which hat am I wearing right now. There are some times that Sam seeks information from me or counsel from me as a volunteer, meaning that because of my background in HR and people and culture, there might be something that I could provide some insight onto. That is not as the chair of the board. I'm not the co-op's HR person. So I have to go, okay, board hat off, volunteer hat on. And that ends up being, so while it feels fairly familiar to me now, it's always interesting when I'm talking to people interested in joining the board that there's still a little bit of like, oh wait, but I'm a foodie and I really want to have influence over what products are in the store. And it's always a little sad to sort of burst their bubble and say, Sam's the CEO of the co-op. Those are operational decisions. And anyway, so that was it's carried through over all of these years.
Yeah, and the other piece within this kind of anchor point about clarifying roles early and then how they're reinforced. So we talked about using that tool that then has been used over the years. I think like Leah talked about, she's adjusted that onboarding and educational slide set for interested and new board members. And I think that's been a really good shift as well because it's shifted the expectations for people coming into the board. And then there are fewer surprises for folks once they're serving. Um, but the other part to it is the actual like relationship between myself and the board chair. Those and the board understanding and imbuing the chair with the role and responsibility of being that close connection point to the GM. And that, for my experience, has been one of the most pivotal reasons why I'm still at the co-op because we always talk about the difficulty and the GMs in the room feel this hard, right? Like there's always this difficulty of serving a board, right? I have 10 bosses, but I don't. I have one boss, right? And so the key is like we talk about speaking with one voice and that's something that I really appreciate that Leah does. And the prior board chair was Siobhan Mitchell, and she led very strongly with that connection that we developed and then in transitioning that over and that Leah then took that up, right? And I think that they both did a great job of handing that piece off. But for me, from my perspective, if I didn't have such a strong working relationship with each individual as a board chair, this would not have worked because there have been bumpy times that have come up. We have had moments that have happened with board members and recorded session, so I'll like leave it fairly neutral. But we have had some things that have come up where people have not spoken with one voice, have spoken to me directly, have been pushy, have wanted to do things that are out of bounds for what an individual director can do on a board. And having that good relationship with the board chair meant that I got to go, hey, I'm forwarding you an email. This is yours to take care of, right? And then I could trust that from that point forward, it would be managed by the board chair and the board, and that wasn't my responsibility to manage individual board members and their opinions. And that's a habit that has been very much ingrained, and I really appreciate the structure that we have around that. It is not, we do not mess around with it, and it is very clear. I like to say I create what I hope is the clearest plexiglass wall so you can see into the store operations, but you will run into that thing if you try to get too close to operations, right? And the board chair is there reinforcing that with me, right? That's not just mine to like hold up that boundary. Um, so that piece is really pivotal and just I don't know, Leah, if you have from your perspective anything you'd share about kind of the development of that relationship and um how it has changed as the store was like built to open because our relationship certainly has changed and it's grown in depth, right? And that's something that's also been key to us overcoming different hurdles and um, major financial hurdles with the co-op and having trust as we did all of that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think now that you're speaking about that, I forgot that there was so many people kind of going at you from the board this way, and then really being very clear about how what those channels of communication were going to be. Um, and no one was doing anything with ill intent, but it
Yeah.
was because of the sort of like, well, I'm on the board, I'm just going to email Sam. I've got a question or an issue, I'm just going to email Sam. And so, again, going back to sort of the delineation of roles, us very transparently talking about that and saying, this is the process we're going to put in place. And this isn't to shut anybody out, but this is to help sort of fortify that one voice concept. And if someone has an issue that I don't know is certainly needs to be confidential, then that's kind of a separate matter. But if it's your opinion, if it's your question, if it's a whatever, we're going to funnel it in a consistent manner. And again, like I forgot because we don't struggle with that at all now. Um, so it's that's nice to kind of reflect back on and say that's not something we're challenged with anymore. I mean, I think too, with we've got several longstanding board members. Um, and I think that that too, because of the trust that has developed with Sam, that has added sort of to the depth of it all. You know, it's sort of, and hopefully trust in me so that the rest of the directors know that I'm going to represent and I'm going to hold Sam accountable and Sam's going to hold me accountable. And I think that that's been sort of one of the nice, something I certainly didn't anticipate. I didn't know Sam when we hired Sam. I was like, oh, GM, you know, oh, I'm board chair. Oh, geez, how did I end up being the board chair? I'm like, okay. Um, and here we are all these years later. And I think it's about open communication and transparency and like being able to call each other out if we disagree, and then also, you know, having each other's backs, so that Sam understands that I support them. And I really feel sort of infinite support from Sam for the work that the board is trying to do. And so that trust and that consistency and that transparency have only gotten stronger over the years.
And this is kind of a good shift, I think, into the second anchor point, which is around building relationships
Mm,
before tensions are deep, right? And so building these structures and relationships before some of the major pieces, because we had major tension points once the store was open, financial ones. We had, really stressful times. I mean, I have Crohn's. My Crohn's flared that first year. It was rough, right? And it was rough on the board. And one of the things that we did though is that we've always had regular check-ins, more so than now because it was more necessary during that build out into opening period. But both myself and Leah, we'd have We'd have our one-on-one check-ins on a regular basis, if not weekly, bi-weekly, but at that point it was weekly.
Mhm.
Um, and then there was also this point as things were getting more tense with the store open and having kind of established in writing some of these rules and boundaries and the ways that we are working together, still proactively, like I was like, look, I can't do more reporting while we're in this level of financial trouble and all the operational work I have to do. Can the executive committee please meet with me on a weekly basis, right? So it was like opting in, all of us opting in to meeting space where we could be open, have open conversation. It was our board secretary who's awesome, Mark Lowe, and he'd take notes in those meetings, circulate them to the rest of the board so that everybody was like aware of what was going on. But it actually reduced my operational reporting so that I didn't have to be like, wait, I'm running a marathon right now. Let me stop for a minute and write another report for the board. So it was really helpful kind of in that period. And that's one of those things we talk about all of these kind of nice ideas, but they have to be put into some kind of structure so that we can do them repetitively and do them well.
Mhm.
Um, and um, so that's, I think what other structures would you think about from that period, especially as we were like the store was opening and um, just some of the things that happened. What were some of the things that from you, Leah? I don't know if there's anything beyond what I shared
Well,
already.
I mean, I think that it, when we really decided to sort of deploy the executive committee, we did it with caution because what we didn't want to do was to create like a subgroup or a secret group or something of that nature. So it really provided a lot of relief for Sam, knowing that the smaller group of us would be able to meet together and that we could effectively and consistently and honestly share right back to the board, the greater board. So that was really important. And we never did any sort of ad hoc without it being fully communicated. And that started, I think building over time. And we don't meet regularly with Sam as an executive committee, but every now and then, we might actually recently we did because we had a gap in one of our meetings and we're like, okay, well, we can't get everybody together, but let's pull the executive committee together and let's then put those meetings out to the rest of the group. And then we had our regular meeting, gosh, was it just last week? And everybody sort of was like, okay, the momentum continues, So I think that has strengthened the relationships, and I think that I'm trying to think if there's any other structures or things that we do.
Well, there's
Um,
the good like no surprises rule, and it
yeah,
goes all directions, which I appreciate that the board was also been there with that. Yeah.
yeah, the other thing that we did, I don't know, remember when we did it, maybe right after that first year when we
Mhm.
really had to hype up communication, we created a board group chat on our phones. And I'm very, very mindful of people's lives outside of their volunteer board work. But we found that it was a really efficient way to deploy messages to the greater board. So, hey, y'all, there's something now in your inbox. Go check your email because we need to make a decision. You need to vote. Um, and that has been something that has stayed. So it's not used a lot. We don't say, hey, the Patriots won. Oh, wait, I forget. Not everyone's from New England. Um, and it's not there to share niceties and whatnot, but it's very practical. It's very functional. And that has stayed.
Yeah, that was a lifesaver. There was a series of decisions, both like right as we were opening and into that first year, where it was like these decisions are gonna have to happen like
Mhm.
rapid fire. And I remember a couple of folks being like, "Good luck getting your board to do that." And then this chat happened, and it was like everyone knew what the boundaries were and what it was for, and it wasn't used for like posting cute cat pictures. It was very much like this is a business thread. It's only used if we have direct business that we need immediate confirmation on. And it worked great. So we'd be like, we would have a conversation, like Leah and I would, or it would be a meeting with the executive committee, and then decisions coming out of that or things that needed to go to the rest of the board would roll out. Leah would send a message to the thread, everybody would check it. They'd vote, we'd be done in 24 hours. It was the most efficient board like voting process I think I've been a part of. And yeah, and so I think within a lot of this, what we're both talking about is these don't have to be the fanciest systems, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily the most polished, completed, perfect tool for it to work. A lot of these were structured and built as we went along. They had partly to do with the individual relationships and working relationships that I had with um, the board chair and myself, but they were things that we could make sure we had documented and that we could use with regularity that didn't get in the way of the doing of our business, right? And I think that's a piece that we always come back to is like, do we have it documented? Do we have a structure somewhere that we can reflect back on and look at? And if we don't, we need to write it down now so that we have it moving forward, even if it's a few bullet points, even if it's a few notes from that executive session, right? But do we have something that we can refer back to? So that was kind of a pretty key thing in all of this. Um, our third, and I know there's lots of stuff in the chat. I'm completely ignoring it right now until until we get through. We're pretty close. So the third anchor is recognizing that this isn't. It's in the it's in the intro for this, but it's an ongoing evolution. That this is not a we got there, right? Like the store opened. We're no longer working board. There's a GM on board. We're here, right? Here is an ever moving target, right? It's ongoing work. I think of it as very similarly to the fact that our co-op holds um, equity and belonging work as core to everything that we do within our business, within both the board's work and the staff and the public. And what that practice says in a way that does translate to business, if you want the business case, it is that it is perpetual ongoing work. Our personal self-improvement, our improvement as a group, our review of our process and practice, um, is the evolution side of things. It doesn't stop. We don't ever get to stay statically. We're here because the business always changes. It's going to impact my role. It's going to impact the board's role. And what we need to focus on and how we're working together and how I'm bringing my team in, right, to the work that the board is doing. So that's kind of this kind of last and very pivotal piece. Um, and so Leah, I think of the last 2 years especially, we're in like a wildly different place than we were 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Kind of getting out of 2023 into 2024. So what would you say were some of the biggest changes to process over that period of time? And how much has it, like how much has it changed? And how we can go like, wow, that was actually 2 years ago, and
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
much has shifted?
Process in terms of, policy reviews and that type of process, or just in
Yeah, and
general?
like how we work together, even frequency of meetings, like all that stuff has shifted.
Certainly. So, back in the day, we were consistently having a working meeting, sort of the second, I forget what night it was. We were meeting on Mondays back in the day. And we'd have a working meeting and then we would have a business meeting, and all board members were present at both, of course. And we utilize those working meetings in different ways, sometimes training, sometimes to solve some particular challenge that we were having. But what is markedly different now is we don't have those scheduled on the calendar. We still have, of course, the business meeting at the end of the month, but we have board committees that may opt to schedule their own time to work together, so that they can do the business of whatever that committee is. So, for example, the finance committee or something of that nature. And I don't think that we would have ever gotten to that point if you'd asked me that 3 years ago. It felt like we should be meeting 4 times a month. Like, what are we doing? Wait, we're going to unleash we're going to get rid of that time. And it's always there as sort of a fallback if we need to, where we could convene everybody, and schedule that. But that's a big difference. Um, the other thing I just think, um, maturity wise, is of course we're always trying to get better. It's iterative, but I think that we've gained a lot of insight into like what it is we are supposed to be doing really, really well. And then reflecting back and saying, hey, we're not doing that really, really well yet. Like we got to keep on keeping on. Whereas, collectively, certainly 4 years ago, there was a lot of us trying to kind of find our way through the dark with this governance stuff and policy review. And I mean, I'm still confused by it, right? All this time later. So I think that we have, I believe, and Sam, you can, say differently if you believe, but a greater sense of like where we need to go next, what we need to do strategically, how do we set up planning for that, how do we do better with our policy review, do we really understand what we're supposed to be doing when we're looking at these policies, and I really appreciate sort of the inquisitiveness of most of the board around like, oh, this is hard thinking work, and like how do we do this? We were just looking at some survey results at the last meeting. And so I guess to your point, we've been making those, we know a little bit more of what we don't know, if that makes any sense. And we get to try to fine tune that. And I look forward to that continuing, in perpetuity.
Yeah. And I think one of the shifts in there as well, I think a good reflection point is as we go into the board elections each year, and we have this conversation with myself and the board, and often Leah and I first, and then with the whole board about like what does the board need as the elections are coming up. And one of the big shifts I think this year was like looking at the list from the last couple of years and going, we don't need that particular skill set anymore, right? The things that you, so like if some of you are on working boards and you haven't hired, you're thinking about hiring, or you have hired and you still don't have much staff. There's so much of the work that you're doing, and you still need somebody who like might be good at social media, and you still might want someone who's like the grassroots organizer who's bringing folks in, and you, right, like thinking about the actual makeup of the board as well and how that can shift over time. And I feel like one of the things I wanted to touch on with this point was there are these phases we go through. So while the work never ends, we kind of do go through some phases and we go, we are through that phase. We should not be returning to that place, right?
Mhm.
There might be times, like you said, Lee, where we could call a working meeting if we needed to. We still have that skill set, we still have that structure. And then we we can say that we've like moved past certain things. And so I have we have a member of our board who does like board communication work, and we meet and we make sure that like the points that the board wants to get across meet with our branding standards for operationally, and that it fits into our schedule for marketing and it's going to go out in the email at this time frame. And so we have those kinds of conversations, but I don't need a board member to do our social media, right? We have staff for that. And I don't need a board member who's going to do like X, Y, and Z in the way that we needed 3 years ago, as the store was opening. And I don't personally want us to ever go back to that place because that partly means that our relationship has become dysfunctional, right? It
Mhm.
also might mean that I'm not operationally utilizing my staff and my team in the right way. Um, so I think it's really important for us as we go, that whole like documentation of what we're doing I'm like gonna say it 50 times because if we can write down what we have done and why, and then we can look back at it and we can say, that's why, and that's why we don't do that one again, because we have moved on from that point. And this place, about 3 years after we're open, this is the point where the work of the board is really shifting from my perspective and from the conversations that I've heard from the board having over the last few meetings. It is really shifting into internal development, right? The board developing its strength around policy governance and better understanding how they would then have this linkage work with me and the operations, right? It's we are setting it to a different level as we move forward. And so we're looking for folks with certain types of expertise within that. or people who are just eager to do that work. But still, it is shifting the narrative and the message about what the board is looking for in incoming board members. So
Mhm.
every time we make these adjustments, and I think this 3 year point, and JQ, you could certainly chime in here, but to me, this is a pretty pivotal year. Ending our 3rd year of store operations, we finally have 2 full years of data, right? So that's enough data now that operationally I can be giving the board, like I gave the board a headwinds report, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have 2 years of data to reflect on and information from the industry to understand where we could be going. And the board has a similar way to look at what have they been working on for the last few years. In a meeting recently, one of the governance committee folks was like, well, if we look at the survey from last
Mhm.
year and the year before, right? And
Yeah.
so we actually have these reflection points that we didn't have before. So as we move forward, we're like, okay, we have some clearer ways that we're kind of shifting our work and focus. And it really clarifies my work internally and how my work as the GM is shifting. And that also is the work of the board shifting at the same time.
I think, Sam,
Um,
before you
yeah.
move on, I'll say real quickly, I know that the time is going fast. It's never been more evident to me the importance of, excuse me, board succession, and building your future board. And then we constantly are saying we want to leave this so that the board in 10 years knows what the heck we were doing. And I'll take full responsibility and sort of supposedly leading the charge for that board development that we've kind of always wait, it feels like, to like the last minute to try to recruit. And last year we were more cognizant of that and we tried to kind of get it stirring a little sooner. But if that's one lesson that I continuously learn every time that we come to this point is that that board development, that recruitment is a monthly project, right? Like I
Yeah.
want to be talking to people about, and we call it now jumping on board, um, all the time, if that's my sole purpose, because that is like sort of that's one, a legacy that I can leave behind, but also it's like it's hard to find people. And then once you tell them you don't get to put the food on the shelves, they're like, oh, maybe I'm just gonna not do it. And I'm harping on that. But that to all of the stuff that we're talking about, when you've made this transition to a governance board, it's only going to be as good as your board is. And then of course the relationship with the GM. So that board development is not a, okay, well, the annual meeting is a couple of months from now. Let's put some, marketing pieces out. It really is a year-long initiative.
Yeah. I think we're at the point I'd love to. I think we should just open it up. We've got lots of stuff in the chat, so I was just gonna open that up and see what we have going on there. Um, so we've got a question from Leslie at Prairie Food. Leah, as board president, would you be willing to share that onboarding deck or parts of it? Now that we're open, we need to explain what our roles are differently than like different onboarding. Um, so that's an open question.
Yes,
Uh, and the answer is yes. Um, and it looks like a bunch of folks would like to see that. And I would note I had a staff member the other day say this. We were talking about a program that we're going to be implementing around some core things in the store, and my purchasing manager said, "Are we taking that or are we going to Assabet it?" And so often the Assabet version is how can we make it as simple as possible, getting the points across that we need, having the goals and the outcomes that we want, but it not having any frills. And that's usually like what assabeting means. So can we make it practical, not perfect? Can we update it as we go, and can we make it as functional as possible? So I would say that our onboarding deck is definitely in the assabeted category. Um, and we would share stuff through JQ, and then we're happy to have that distributed.
for sure.
Um, So I'm trying to see if there's questions. I'm also happy if folks just want to chime in at this point. Um, I have a question from Tyler, that we don't have issues with the boards not speaking with one voice. A lot of co-ops boards experience high turnover. What systems can you put in place to perpetuate unified communication throughout board churn to combat GM turnover? That's a great question, Tyler. Um, Lee, I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on this one.
I didn't hear the whole question, and I'm looking for it in the chat
So
stream.
it's what systems could be put in place to perpetuate unified communication from the board to the GM? So like, what do we have in place? My initial thing is it's in the board orientation.
Hmm.
So it's in the orientation. It is also um, I think this is where it might depend on and really would take reinforcement from the board because it's also in my statement to the new board members. Not every GM may feel comfortable or supported saying that. So I think that's where this does come back to the working relationship that Leah and I have as board chair and GM. I feel reinforced when I say, and by the way, here's the boundary, right? And it's coming from both the board and myself within that kind of orientation process. And then I would say Leah does a great job of reinforcing that every meeting. That if things are getting into a place where that's not functionally being utilized, it's called out in a, I like to call it like a kindly, confrontational way. Um, you know, I care about you, and so I'm going to tell you that you're fucking up right now. And so I want you to come back in with us, and I want you to be in this space working with us, but be aware that you've really just stepped outside of our process.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the good news, and this is going to jinx us, but we haven't had to confront that much lately.
Yeah,
Um,
not in the last couple of years, I don't think.
yeah, and I think that it was getting through some difficult times with that that helped us get better at sort of laying out those sort of expectations early on. And sort of going back to that board development piece, like we've been mindful about the cohesiveness of the board. And though our interview process for board recruitment isn't so, you know, rigid, it's like trying to assess, and me making recommendations to the board for candidates, like is this individual going to be able to embrace the values that we have and sort of follow along or embrace, I think is better than just following everything. And so the conflict that the heights that conflict might have reached earlier on, again, knock on wood, we haven't necessarily experienced that recently. And I think people really get the one voice element of what it is that we're trying to do, because we have this open store that is successful and we want it to continue to thrive. And I think that there's this sort of understanding that we are a body that is representing the larger community, and we've got such a huge responsibility in doing that. I think people take that very seriously, and we're not just getting together once a month to like disagree, or to fight about stupid stuff. um, so that too, I think, has impacted whether it was conscious or not.
Mhm.
People embrace the values, and they want to understand what one voice is, and continue supporting that.
Yeah. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you, Beth.
Um,
Yeah, great answer.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I know this is like this is not a startup thing. This is a open co-op. Doesn't matter how long you've been alive as a co-op thing. And I think it does have to do with the regular like health and function of the board. Um, There's a question from Leslie. How do we handle situations when Sam, would recommend X strategy or change that the board didn't agree with? What expectations did the board set for Sam to provide support for decisions that were being made so the board could evaluate if reasonable and know the impact?
Oh boy. I have to be able to see them too, not just listen to you.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's like halfway, it's like about halfway down.
oh boy. And who asked the question?
Leslie from Prairie Food.
All right, sorry, y'all. Okay. Well, um, it's a really good question. I'm trying to think of a recent example of that. I don't know that can you think of
Uh,
it coming to mind?
we had one of the policy reports 2 years ago
Oh, yeah.
that was it was interesting. We were in agreement that we didn't like it, but not in agreement on which direction to go in with it.
Yes, yes,
Do you remember this
I do.
scenario?
It's kind of coming back to me, but I do. Um, Healthy discussion. And I- which report was it?
So
Was
it
it
was it was the B1 report, which is the
yeah, but
financial
yes,
report,
yeah.
and basically it was the outcome of what standard policy reporting is, which it is a wordy report and it's a wordy response, and it has financials that are tied to it with charts in it, but it was like a beast of a report for folks who aren't used to looking at policy governance and finance.
Yeah.
And I believe the pushback came from a couple of board members, but then the board was in agreement as a whole, right? So that was a moment where somebody spoke up about it, and then other board members were like, actually, yes, with one voice, we're going to say we would like to see something different. Um, and and there wasn't a specific ask, but there was like a parameter shift, and the request was, is there a better way that we can see the actual financial data with the report itself? Is there some way that this can get tied in? And and so um, I then reworked it and then started to build a dashboard. So there's a website that I've built for our board, like an internal website. And so I shifted it, and now there's of I personally love it. I have less writing to do for our B reports and more data graphics work to do. And so anywhere that I can make it a chart, it's a chart. And then that chart updates in the website when the numbers are finished for the quarter, and then it just is there. And so the board then approved that change, and that's the report that they accept now.
Mhm.
So that was kind of one of those circumstances where we navigated through it.
It was really important. I don't remember it specifically. I think I've repressed it because it was challenging.
Yeah,
It
yeah, it
was
was.
it was one of those moments where, again, like your mind hurts trying to think about reporting and what this information is, and not being most people not being familiar with it or trying to interpret it so that they can make a decision, they can support a decision or ask a question. And so we were really mired in the language of it and like trying to figure out like how do we do something that's practical and digestible for the entire board to feel comfortable with the information that they're getting from Sam. And it wasn't contentious, and Sam is so amazing to work with that Sam was like, I am not making any changes. Where the tension was like, how? Like, what are we going to do with this so that people feel that they have the data the way or the information the way that they need it? And
Yeah.
and that process, it gave birth to a much better um, outcome.
Yeah, and I think one of the steps in it, which is typically good with situations where there are folks feeling frustrated with something like this, is that we did not come to a conclusion in that meeting where it came up. It did get rested and then picked up again in another meeting, right? So it wasn't like issue raised, resolution must happen here in the moment. Um, and so it did get drawn out a little bit as a result, but it was better because we weren't trying to have both the digesting the frustration, solving for the issue, and coming up with the solution all in the same conversation. And and that was the part that we were all on the same page about, right? It was like, okay, like understanding that there's these frustrations. Can you give me parameters? And then I'm going to go away and I'm going to come back, and then we can have a conversation about adjustments. And that was how we navigated through that one. Um, excuse me. We don't have a ton of time left, so I don't know if there are any other questions that folks wanted to bring up. There've just been some back and forth, I think, in the chat beyond that. And I'm trying to see if there's anything I've missed. But yeah, are there other questions or thoughts? Anything we didn't really touch on that you were hoping we would during the session today?
You guys were incredibly on point and with everything you wanted to cover and even answering some questions that I wasn't sure you guys had experienced. It was really good to hear that even in that strong relationship, there were those kinds of tense moments and how you handled them. Because definitely there are startups that are struggling more, that are hitting those moments. And it's really helpful to hear that you guys also navigated those and how.
Yeah, I think the piece that I'll always come back to is each transition, and so we're at a point where there will be transition to a new board chair, and Leah is leaving the board chair role, but not my life. We will work together and stay friends, and I'm so happy for that. But um, we're kind of at this point where there will be transition to a new board chair coming in, and what Leah knows and has known for a long time is how much that will impact my day-to-day work. My work, if the board is making a lot of work for me, can be 30% of my job, can be working for the board.
Mhm.
Right now, the board does not take up that much of my time, partly because of what the operational needs have been, but also partly because of the relationship that we have. And depending on who the new board chair is, that could really impact my physical actual work, right? And so that's something that we've been very conscious of and have been trying to kind of look at who is currently on our board, who could be stepping into that role, and what the needs of that person are. And that's been a very intentional conversation amongst all of us. Um, and the same thing happened before when Siobhan was the board chair, and then it was leading into Leah being on the board. It's each time it's been a very in-depth, um, vulnerable conversation about what support needs I have and I wish that there were more folks on more boards that were willing to have those types of conversation and recognize how just how much better the relationship can be if we can have those conversations and how difficult it can be for folks in the operational role if we can't. And if you sideline us and have that conversation as a board and don't include the GM in the conversation about like what they need from their next board chair, what they need from incoming board members, what they need from that process. That's like something that I can't say thanks enough to Leah and to our whole board over the years in making that possible. Yeah.
I think that's a great place for us to say. I will say, of course, Sam is absolutely amazing. You will hear that again and again. And people are always like, "Can we clone Sam?" I've had private messages saying, "Can we clone Sam?" But I want to take a chance to just hold up Leah and her amazing work as a board chair and what she brings to it. And Siobhan before her, they have created this amazing culture of governance and support and being and both holding up the co-op and the responsibility of the co-op and being an amazing boss and human being in the process. So that's rarely that they get to hear that. So I'm glad Sam held it up and I'd like to as well. They have always been exemplary in this area. And then Sam has been amazing at helping the board be amazing. It has definitely been a joint effort.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I'm going to take a second, just wrap us up because this is our last session. So thank you, at least for this year, not for, thank you to Leah and Sam again. This was so valuable. This is going to definitely be getting shared out to a lot of boards. I can see that coming. And it's such a, contribution to this difficult situation we're going through where a lot of startups are struggling with exactly this. So thank you. And just one last time, thank you. We had a record number of sponsors this year for FCI Live who believe in this kind of education and all of us having access to it as cooperators across the US for free in a way that we can come together and feel like one community as we learn. So thank you so much to all of them. These are our fellow cooperators. This isn't just some company. These are people who really care about the cooperative movement. And that's a wrap. All of FCI Live 2026 videos will be emailed to you tomorrow, and you'll get an email with a link to all of them. And thank you so much for being in community with us throughout the series.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.